All right, let's dive in. Every single company, from a tiny startup to a massive corporation, has an invisible architecture holding it all together. Today, we're going to explore that very structure, corporate governance. Think of it as a company's first and most important shield against total chaos. Before we even get to talk about the exciting stuff like profits or performance or cool new products, we have to ask a much more basic question. What keeps a company from imploding? What keeps it safe from itself?
And the answer isn't a single person, some superstar CEO or one specific department. Nope, it's a whole system. It's a complete framework for how the company is directed and controlled, and we call it corporate governance.
So here's the key takeaway right up front. Governance isn't really about performance. It's about safety. It's the rule book. It's designed to stop internal failures, everything from simple slip-ups to outright fraud. And crucially, it's there to make sure the people running the show are actually working for the people who own the company.
So if this is a defense system, what's it actually built on? Let's take a look. We can use the principles from a major global standard, the UK Corporate Governance Code, to really see the core pillars.
What's great about this is you can see it's not just one big thing. It's built on 5 absolutely critical pillars. First up, board leadership and company purpose. Basically, who's in charge and what are we even trying to do here? Then you've got division of responsibilities, making sure everyone knows their job to avoid conflicts. Third is composition. Are the right people even on the board? Fourth, you've got audit and risk, the systems that double-check all the work. And finally, remuneration, how everybody gets paid, which, let's be honest, is a huge motivator. Every single one has to be strong for the whole structure to work.
But just like buildings, not all companies are designed the same. When you look at how power is structured at the very top, there are really 3 main architectural blueprints. Okay, first you've got the most common model, the one you'll see all over the US and the UK. It's the Anglo Saxon system. It's pretty straightforward. Shareholders elect one board of directors. And on that board, you've got a mix of insiders who run the company day to day, the executives, and outsiders whose job is to supervise them, the non-executives. The golden rule here is that the supervisors cannot be the managers.
Then there's the continental model, which is really popular in places like France and Italy. This system basically builds a wall between the two groups. You have one board of managers running the daily operations and a totally separate supervisory body that just watches over them. The whole point is to get maximum independence between managing and supervising.
And the third model is the dual system, which has its roots in Germany. This one's really interesting because it evolved from this desire for more specialized expert oversight. Here, the shareholders actually take a step back. They don't pick the managers themselves. Instead, they appoint a trusted supervisory board of experts, and that board goes out and hires the professional management team. You see this a lot in big companies where investors want to delegate that tricky task of picking the right managers.
And there's a fascinating real-world example of this from the Italian football club, Lazio. The president, who, let's just say, wasn't super popular with the fans, actually changed the company's structure to this dual system. So why would he do that? Well, it meant that angry fans couldn't just buy one cheap share, show up at the annual meeting, and yell at him. It created a buffer, shielding the management team from that direct friction with shareholders. Pretty clever, right?
Okay, so you've got these different power structures. But how are they monitored? Every company needs guards or auditors to make sure things are running the way they should. But there are 2 very different types of watchdogs, and they have 2 very different missions. And the difference between them is absolutely critical. It all comes down to one simple question. Who do you work for? Internal auditors are employees of the company. Their job is to look at how things are done and ask, can we do this better? Can we be more efficient? Can we be safer? They report inward to the management. But external auditors, they're total outsiders, hired to check the company's books on behalf of the shareholders. Their only question is, are these numbers accurate and do they follow the rules?
So what happens when all of these defenses, all of these watchdogs fail? To really get that, we need to understand the psychology of why fraud even happens in the first place.
This is something called the fraud triangle. And it basically argues that fraud isn't just about greed. It's a perfect storm of 3 things happening at once. First, someone is under intense financial pressure. Second, they see an opportunity, a weakness in the system where they think they won't get caught. And third, they rationalize it. They tell themselves a story like, I deserve this, or the company is so big they'll never miss it.
And this triangle leads to something called the fraud paradox.
Now check this out. The most common type of fraud is what's called asset misappropriation. Stealing office supplies, fudging an expense report. It happens all the time, but the financial damage from each case is usually pretty small. But on the other hand, you have financial statement fraud, literally cooking the books. It is incredibly rare. But when it happens, oh man, the damage can be absolutely catastrophic, often taking the whole company down with it. So, if that opportunity corner of the triangle is the weak spot, how do you fix it? Well, the single most powerful weapon we have is a simple idea: segregation of duties. It just means that you make sure no single person controls a financial transaction from start to finish. For example, the person who approves a payment should never be the same person who records that payment in the books. It makes it much, much harder to hide something fishy.
Okay, let's zoom all the way out. We've talked about structures, watchdogs, and fraud, but why should anyone outside of a boardroom actually care about any of this? Why does it matter to us?
Because here's the bottom line. Good governance is directly linked to a fundamental accounting principle called going concern. Now that sounds like a bunch of jargon, but all it really means is the basic assumption that a company will survive long enough to meet its obligations. It's the belief that the lights are going to stay on tomorrow, and without good governance, that belief just falls apart.
So at the end of the day, governance isn't just a boring set of rules. It is the bedrock of trust. It's what protects investors, what helps a company survive for the long haul, what gives us reliable information, and what prevents those catastrophic failures that can wipe out jobs and savings in the blink of an eye.
And that leaves us with a final thought, doesn't it? This invisible shield of corporate governance. It's all around us. The strength of these systems impacts our investments, our jobs, the entire economy. It really makes you wonder, just how strong are those walls?